Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I love to ask people, if you could be there to witness any event in the life of Jesus, what would it be and why? It's fascinating to hear what stories mean the most to people and how those stories of Jesus have impacted their lives. I've asked that question a lot. And over the past 30 years or so, I've noticed something about the answers I have gotten. By far the most popular answer, the answer I get over and over again, is the story of Jesus walking on the water. People would like to have seen that. Well, the more I think about it, I think watching Peter out on that water would be even more interesting. This week we're exploring some stories of Peter in the gospel narrative and noticing how so often the things Peter does, the way Peter acts and reacts, is so similar to what we would do and how we so often act and react today. And that's true once again in the story of Jesus walking on the water. You might remember how it goes. Jesus had fed more than 5,000 people, starting with a boy's sack lunch of 5 fist-sized barley loaves and 2 sardine-sized fish. And then he sent the crowds away and his disciples across the lake while he went up into the hills alone to pray. It was late when they started out in the boat, and it quickly grew dark, and then there was a storm too. That's when Jesus showed up, walking on the water. Some thought it was a ghost, but when they called out, Jesus said, "It is I." Now, a little side note here. When Moses asked God his name, God's answer was, "I am." That's very similar to Jesus' answer here. You could understand the disciples crying out and Jesus answering them with, "It is I am." That choice of words lets you know that this is a theophany, a revelation of God. More importantly, a revelation of Jesus as God. And that's when bold, impetuous Peter said, "Lord, if it is you, then command me to come to you on the water, on the waves." And Jesus did. I often wonder what that first step must have felt like for Peter, expecting soft water, but somehow feeling support there under his foot. And suddenly both of his feet were on the lake, not in it, and he was walking toward Jesus. What a profound moment of faith. But the Bible tells us that Peter began to notice the wind and the waves and began to sink. And I think that's where we come in. We may have profound moments of faith as well, moments where our lives and our eyes are fixed on Jesus, but then the worries and distractions of our world crowd in, and our eyes are filled with all those things, and we begin to sink as well. And then, like Peter, there is only one option for us. We cry out, "Lord, save me." And in love, in grace, Jesus does. You can't help but see yourself in this story, wavering back and forth between faith and lack of faith. The other story we want to look at today also describes us. Peter asked Jesus how many times he was supposed to forgive someone. Then he asked if 7 times was enough. And my guess is that Peter thought he was being profoundly generous by suggesting 7. You see, the rabbis in his day said you were required to forgive only 3 times. So Peter takes the standard of the day, doubles it, and then adds another to come up with 7, the number for perfection or completeness. Surely Jesus would be impressed with this show of magnanimity. But of course you know the answer. Jesus says 70 times 7. Or in other words, forgiveness shouldn't have any kind of limit on it. And what a gracious answer that is. I know I need that kind of forgiveness from God. But you see, Peter, like us, was looking for the limit of forgiveness not the extent of it. We so often do that, looking for what little we can get away with, searching out loopholes in God's Word, and to get by with just what is required and missing out on what is really all about. We focus on what the limit is. Jesus calls us to fullness beyond limits. Jesus calls us not to requirements, but to love. So as much as people would like to see Jesus on the water, what Peter shows us in these stories is pretty important too. We see a man like us wavering between faith and lack of faith. We see a man like us trying to find the limit of grace and missing the whole point, that it is grace precisely because it doesn't have a limit. Ah, Peter, thank you for showing us ourselves. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.